Well, good day to all the good people in the world of tone. We're on our way to Tone Town today, one chairman short. Brian, unfortunately, is dealing with a sick child, and as we all know, when you're dealing with a sick child, that can really ruin your evening. For any of us that have kids, I've learned this recently. But nonetheless, we have a great supplement to Brian. The incomparable KDH is with us today. And if you're not familiar with his work, he is the host and personality of one of my favorite YouTube channels. And I say that not lightly. I think that he does something unique that I really don't see any other channels in the gear world do, where not only is he, I think he's sort of like the journalist, really, that is speaking the truth and doing God's work here in the gear and gear news industry. He is eloquent, he is researched, and when he comes out with something about a guitar brand that maybe we are not aware of as just, casual consumers of gear news, he comes out with some of the most interesting pieces that I've seen. I'm always riveted by the things that he comes out with, and I'm so glad that he's here today. We're going to be talking specifically about the state of the industry, guitar marketing, what's to come in the next 5 and 10 years. I feel like he's uniquely positioned with his finger on the pulse to be able to explain to us where he thinks things are going and the state that we're in now. And so I'm really interested to discuss that and other topics. Welcome, KDH.
Thank you very much, Mason and Grant. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I've been an avid listener for a while now, and it's good to be on, and we're going to have a little discussion about the industry and just stuff that I find really interesting. I suppose that's why I talk about it so much.
Grant, any initial questions before we really dive in with KDH? I know that you have recently been hip to the channel, and you've been binge watching it since I've introduced it to you. Any initial thoughts or questions before we get into it?
Oh, very, very important question, actually, right off the top, KDH, if that's okay. How's your seat in the Miata today? Are you feeling comfy?
I'm actually standing right now.
Oh, shoot. Well, luckily today the Miata is standing room only. He's
a little extra wind drag with the convertible as from photos proportionally, you seem like you're pretty tall, KDH. So that could give us a little extra drag.
Oh yeah, well, I suppose 6'1". It's
all right,
above average, but not too tall. So we're just the wind in my hair in this particular car journey to Tone Town.
And if you're not watching on YouTube, KDH has got me beat in the hair category. He's probably got a good foot on me in terms of length and flowing locks of hair. So just want to clarify that to anybody who's listening only, that maybe KDH, and I've thought about this before, that maybe we get a shampoo endorsement here on the channel, because I go through quite a bit with the length of my hair. So just something to think about if you ever want to parlay into podcasting, or maybe you already have and I'm just not aware of it. This could be an option.
Could be. But I suppose I don't know how to segue from shampoo.
Well, yeah, this was the deliberate thing. We wanted to sort of pigeonhole you where you had nowhere to go by throwing shampoo and tone and mixing them together. But I think the place where I'd really like to start, if you have no objection, is maybe just, I'm really curious, just first of all, as somebody in your position, how do you come up, like, for example, you've recently released something about Dean guitars and some of the things that are sort of going on behind the scenes at Dean that I certainly had no idea about, and that the company is in peril, or so it seems, from a legal perspective. How do you even find out about these things? Are these things that you're constantly researching? Are you searching like legal archives for any of these like keywords? Like, how are you coming up or even finding this news?
Well, I suppose it's a case by case basis, but for things like with the Dean stuff, certain stories I will keep an eye on for months, if not longer. Some things I've just kept track of for even a year or more. And just waiting until the whole story presents itself, or a sizable chunk of the story. With the legal stuff, it's pretty easy, especially if it's a US company, because a lot of stuff is publicly accessible. So you just have to, in the Dean case, I knew that they already had several legal tussles between other companies, and so that was a great starting space. When you're searching for that, you also see other stuff, and a lot of it's boring. Most stuff I go through is a lot of boring stuff, and I'm sifting through stuff for hours to get maybe a 10-second sentence from a video.
Mhm.
But I can find information pretty easily now, because sometimes, I suppose I've established myself as the guy who does it, so sometimes I get tip-offs
Mhm.
from different people. Sometimes it's great information, sometimes it's not really, but it all of it takes a really long time to get an 8-minute video out.
Yeah.
Because I noticed
So-
that even with the Dean one, I watched that as well, and I think that might have been the first or second video. I was saying before, for those listening, that I hadn't watched KDH's channel before, and now I feel like I'm an expert because I've watched so many of your videos.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first. Like, man, this guy. That was my exact thought for a 10. Maybe the Dean one was somewhere around the 10-minute mark, if I'm not mistaken. I was very curious how much time, if you even have any idea, it took in research and documents and checking your facts to get that 10-ish minute video out. Do you remember roughly?
Oh, like, if I was paying myself minimum wage, I'd be a lot richer than I am now.
Yeah.
All these videos take so much time. I don't even keep track, because if I
Yours
did, I'd
especially,
probably
man.
quit.
Yeah, yours are
Like-
brutal.
Especially like, every word I say is scripted. So it's not just researching, it's researching, scripting, double checking that script, triple checking that script. Because the things I say, I know there will always be someone who doesn't like that,
Yeah.
and will likely threaten some sort of legal thing. Now, that's happened before, in the sense that it's not an official threat, not like a cease and desist where it would actually be a legal thing, but it's always I'm going to talk to my lawyer, and I'm very confident in, yes, you'll talk to them, and they'll look over it, and they'll see that everything I've said is fine, because I've spent so much time double checking, triple checking, making sure every word is fine.
Yeah.
So a lot of time is invested in this stuff to make sure that it's all above board and it's as factual as I can possibly make it. Too much time, probably.
Yeah.
I really appreciated it though, in the sense that even with the staying on the Dean Guitars one, in my mind, to be honest, not ever being a huge Dean Guitars advocate by any means.
Oh,
Never
come
owned one of their
on,
instruments.
Grant.
I know.
I've
always time.
I've seen your dime bag
There
Daryl
is
tattoo.
always time. How'd you see that? That's in a hidden spot. But with like the Dean one, it took what, from my outside, very limited perspective, was a huge company, big board of directors, and it brought it down to like, oh, these are normal people having petty arguments, what would seem like petty arguments. And, it brought Dean a lot closer to home in the sense that, there's just normal people running it behind the scenes. And your video really enlightened me to the fact that even in a company of that size, which in comparison to what I'm used to is massive, is just a mom and a son, from what you said on your video, arguing over what seems to be like should just be quite easily resolvable in the grand scheme of things. And so I really appreciated that video and your perspective, and if I can say, the hours and hours of unappreciated work that you put into it. It was great. It was really enlightening for me. So I don't know if all that means I'm just saying a big thank you for your hard work, but I'm really enjoying the channel.
Well, thank you. And that's actually a really interesting point you brought up about the normal people, everyday people in this industry. I'd go so far as to say, at least from the work that I've done and what I've seen in the last, I don't know, 3 years or something that I've been doing this, or 4 years, is that pretty much every company is just normal people, regular, average, ordinary stuff, bar like Fender and Gibson. Other than that, it's pretty much like one guy, two guys, and then some employees.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I highly recommend for anybody that hasn't watched it, the Dean video of the recent stuff. I think is one of the kind of most interesting sort of deep dives. And I if you're unfamiliar with just sort of the general synopsis, it's in essence that, and you can redirect me, KDH, if this is an incomplete summary, but the takeaway for me was in essence that there was a sort of this family feud between sort of the corporate entity itself that was comprised primarily in terms of ownership between the son and the mother that own whatever the holding company or corporation that owns Dean Guitars, and simultaneously they sort of had been castrated by Gibson, been basically having to discontinue their most popular models of guitars based on the loss of a lawsuit, presumably costing them hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million, probably just to be in court and fight that one with Gibson, I would think.
Funny enough, they lost, I believe it was just over $10,000 total to Gibson. That was it.
Wow.
In legal fees.
That was it. Legal fees and supposed profits that they had made when they shouldn't have been selling the Z and V shapes after.
Wow.
It was ridiculously low from what I saw. So
I wonder how
I was expecting it to be a lot more, but no, $10,000 to Gibson.
That's extraordinarily low. I mean, probably I would imagine what they did, just based on my experience as a manufacturer and having dealt with things of not quite at that scale, but of this nature, is usually there's just like a settlement, like this is what a license would have cost on the units that you sold, and so we want to recoup this amount of money back, because this would be equivalent to whatever 5% of the profits that you made, and usually the companies will really inflate their costs so that it makes it seem like it's less profitable when they submit that, and they'll build in all these marketing expenses and production costs and try to make it seem as though it's not really that profitable. So then Gibson looks at it and says, okay, well, and I guess we can settle on this lesser number. But that was a really interesting video. I highly recommend people check it out. I'm curious though, just kind of talking about a little bit about your background. It almost seems to me, are you did you go to school for journalism or something like that, KDH? Because it seems as though you're almost an investigative journalist, and you just so happened, of all the different industries you could choose to research, the guitar industry.
No, I have no formal education, no college education. So I have up until high school, and then that's my education level.
Is this a testament to Irish public schools?
Maybe.
They're hitting it out of the park. If you're the baseline.
But like I didn't do any of that sort of stuff. I just kind of fell into doing this. I always say it all the time. People put the label of journalist or investigative journalist or stuff. I've never referred to myself as that, because I'm not. I'm just a guy with a camera. And in fact, for like 2 of the 4 years I've been doing this, it wasn't even my camera. I was borrowing it. So anybody can do what I do. You just have to spend a lot of time on it. Like we were discussing before, I think that's the main blockade for most people. Most people don't want to spend hours and hours and hours going through different court documents to find a paragraph that's useful. So it's not really the journalistic aspect of it has no education. It can be done by anyone who wants to.
Yeah.
Crazy. I have a question for you about kind of the industry as a whole since COVID, which I want to ask you right after this. I want to talk about a couple of our sponsors. The first one I want to chat about is the Guitar Sanctuary, where if Brian Omilion was with us, he would be sitting, and even with a sick kid, I have a feeling he might be there anyways. Sick kid right beside
nursing him back to health.
Exactly. At the Guitar Sanctuary, a lot of the gear, maybe not so much in this podcast because we're talking about the industry as a whole, but a lot of the gear that we talk about on Chairman of the Boards, you can find at the Guitar Sanctuary. Great shop. And Brian obviously is the man himself that will set up your board if you choose to get that done in the Guitar Sanctuary itself. Kid or not, it's going to be a great setup with great gear. So please check out theguitarsanctuary.com as one of our absolute favorite shops in the US. And then I also want to tell you guys about monocreators.com. They have recently come out with a new set of power supplies, which I have to be honest, I am yet to check out myself, but really innovative design. And I'm very curious to check those out and see them in person. Great line of pedal boards, which I chat about all the time, having all that room underneath for their angled boards. And lastly, their gig bags and pedal board bags and backpacks. Superior quality, huge fan, lots of storage, and you can get 10% off with the code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN at monocreators.com. So those are our first two sponsors I wanted to tell you guys about today. But now to my question. We have been talking about your obvious skills, patience, and perseverance when it comes to getting the facts, diving deep on documents that I have to be honest, I would not have the patience or ability to do. You say anyone can do it. I'm sitting here be like, no, I can't do that. Like you've got a skill, whether you acknowledge it or not. You have this ability to find these facts and details that others just simply miss or aren't willing to look for. My question, since COVID, the industry has changed. That is undeniable. You've done many videos on that already, how it's affected lead times, promises that companies have made and ultimately not kept, manufacturing and deliverables and all that. In your perspective, from the immense research that you've done, what has really changed, maybe at a top level? What have you seen that has really affected the end user? Let's say we have someone listening to the podcast that is a guitar player. How is the industry now different? What are we going to tell our kids 10 years from now? Like, oh, that's when this shifted. Can you just speak to that and the biggest shifts you've seen in the industry as a whole, whether that's company specific or more in general?
I would say, like, I started really digging in during COVID.
Okay.
So I can't present too much here, as in, because I didn't invest too much time looking, but as a purchaser of gear and stuff, just availability in general took a massive hit, and it hasn't come back really. Like the chip shortage stopped everything. I suppose the big thing that I would say when it comes to guitars maybe would be it became very obvious that a lot of manufacturers use the same factory, more so than it was before COVID. Because it used to be, like, let's take world music, for example, in Korea, because, like, there's probably 10 brands that I could list right now that get all their models made there. There would be some delays, usually, where a bigger company would need more guitars or whatever, and they would have their order pushed forward, and your order that you placed that was supposed to be made this month is being pushed back to 6 months down the line. But that would happen to one company. Now it's kind of happening to 6 or 7 at the same time.
Yeah, wow.
And it's very obvious when you look at, like, here's the new guitars released, and then they show up on the shelves a year later. Because that's happened with numerous brands that I can name, and most of them came from the same factory. That was the big obvious thing for most consumers on the consumer end. Just delays in getting stuff.
Yeah.
And of course that affects the brands as well, because, like, they're not getting any money during all that time.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of them too right now that some of them are receiving this inventory sort of as we speak, and the demand has somewhat thinned out consequentially between that time. And also the economy is much different than maybe when they placed these orders over a year ago, especially in the US, the interest rates have climbed a lot. Money is more expensive than it was. And people's spending habits have kind of been curtailed because of a concern of looming recession. So now a lot of these brands have all this inventory on hand. They have fewer buyers that are interested in it because the ordering patterns that they were placing that was predicting what the market might have looked like a year ago is considerably different today. And I'm curious in how that's going to impact a lot, especially the larger manufacturers, because companies that are smaller like us, even though we order or we manufacture in the 500 to 1,000 range, in a lower cost item like a pedal, that's not so problematic. But when you're talking about even Korean made guitars, for something that maybe sells, I don't know, $600 to $800 in the U.S. market, that's still a considerably more upfront cost to those companies. And a lot of those contract manufacturers, and I don't know if this is clear to everybody, that they're hiring in Korea or wherever it may be, a lot of those companies are not getting, particularly great terms. Like a lot of times those all have to be paid COD, which means they have to pay for those products before they ever ship out of the country of manufacture. They don't typically get these long terms where they can pay it back over 90 or 180 days, like they may with, other contract manufacturers. Typically dealing overseas, they want their money up front before they even touch a CNC machine.
And then shipping prices as well. You might have ordered your batch of guitars made. The container prices have gone up huge amounts. I remember it was during COVID, a guitar brand that I know of was in a bidding war over shipping containers because we have the guitars, they have to be shipped out, but we have to pay well over what it should be just for a shipping container. Yeah. And then that adds a huge portion onto the end consumer to try and make that money back. Yeah. So it's really, it didn't do anything good really for the industry. I don't think.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and that's definitely a big consideration. Is that there's a bidding war for these because there's only a finite number of shipping containers that are coming over, especially when the ports here in California in particular had a lot of issues with being able to bring in shipping containers even into the major ports on the West Coast, which were like Long Beach, Oakland, San Pedro. They couldn't, there'd be ships that were just sitting out in the ocean waiting to come in for months before they could even unload ships. And I know, Grant and I have, I don't know if Grant, if you ended up using them, but we have a custom transformer that's made overseas in China because it's the only place I could get it made in volume. And I remember that the cost to get it flown in, because I was trying to get it like sent by boat, this custom piece, it was almost as much as the transformers, like 1,000 transformers was almost as much as the air shipping, just to get it shipped, as opposed to the getting it by boat. But then there was such a backlog that it was like you had to wait 3 months to get it if you brought it over by boat, because there was just so many competing entities trying to get into that same shipping container, because there's a lot of consolidation that I guess happens between maybe brands that have made whatever agreements that they're going to pay for a third of the container, and this other company's going to pay for 2/3 of the container because of however they've allocated their inventory. But in any case, it's a real thing.
I don't know if you guys remember, if you guys experienced a similar thing, but at the beginning of COVID, when we started seeing the shortages and demand go up and ability to supply just plummet, and people were throwing around dates like, this was in late 2020. Yeah. People were throwing around dates like 2024. The chip shortage should be going back to normal. It's like, there's no way. Come on, turn the factory on, make some more chips, get a few more containers. Like, there's no way this is going to go into 2024. And here we are, middle of 2023, still talking about it. And 2024, I'm like, man, if things are sorted by then, that's awesome. Like, I would love it if I can get all the parts and the stock I need at a fair price although higher than pre-COVID, I understand, but at a fair price, like I'll be over the moon. And so now, maybe 2025, maybe beyond. And it's just the not just our industry, but just supply and demand globally it's just blowing my mind. The knock-on effects that we are now experiencing because of the pandemic and what everyone thought was going to happen, demand drop versus what actually happened. And, here we are. And so I just can't believe that we're still talking about this 3 years later. It's a little depressing, but also makes for some interesting conversation along the way.
Well, let me ask you this, KDH. So, we talked a little bit about kind of the impact of COVID. I'm curious, sort of based on your experiences and what you've been seeing. And again, as I've said earlier, I feel like you really have a unique position in the industry with sort of your finger on the pulse in a place where maybe most people are not fully aware. I know that may sound a little subversive, a little unusual in the phrasing. But I'm curious where you kind of see the industry going, maybe in the next 5 years, maybe next 10 years, based on kind of what you're seeing now and sort of some of the things that are occurring in this moment in time.
I think it's really hard to tell because you've got the factors like the chip shortages and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But as the years goes on, there's more and more and more gear. So that means that there's more gear on the secondhand market. And I don't know. I feel like there's going to be a drop off. Like that's my guess, because like your pedalboard can only get so big before it's the size of a double bed. Eventually people will slow down, and I think that's kind of starting to happen. Like I know that I have far too many guitars already, so I feel like this might start to slow down. It's hard to tell though. The digital modelers and everything, that's changed the industry quite a bit. And then like the advertising of different products, like I've talked about this, it's there's a lot of oversaturation, or it feels like a lot of oversaturation, and I think a lot of products just get forgotten about. So in the next 10 years, like you guys have built plenty of boards in your time. I would say a lot of them have like the Strymon timeline on them at some point. Like that's an 11-year-old pedal, but it's stayed consistent. I'm not sure I'm seeing too many products that are going to stay consistent in 11 years. So that's kind of my view.
And it does also seem, I'd be curious in your take on this, if you'd agree or disagree. And I am very happy to be disagreed with. I have to say that at the outset. But it seems like we talked about this a week or two ago, with social media, YouTube, schematics being available online, anyone can start a pedal business. Anyone, if they're willing to put in some work up front, anyone can learn how to build a guitar. Basically, anyone can start a boutique company in this industry if they are willing to make a few mistakes along the way. There are so many small companies, Goodwood Audio being one of them, that are now launching products, which seems like on a daily basis. I look at my Instagram feed, there's always a new product out. There's even today, I was on, right before the podcast, I was on Instagram, and Boss has just come out with a new, is it a bigger modulation synth thing? Yeah. It's like their 500 series, but bigger, a little bit bigger than the 500 series.
Okay.
And I'm like, man, I just can't keep up. It's my job to be in the industry and know what's happening. I can't keep up with pedal releases, let alone someone that's on, an hour a week just seeing what's happening. And so even myself, I find myself, customers are now more and more telling me about pedals they want on their board. I'm like, I've never heard of that pedal. This was not happening 10 years ago. I knew just about every pedal people would talk about, and now I just can't keep up. So the stayability of an effect, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're going to have to find some other way to just keep reminding people, just poking them like, hey, this is a new product. This still exists. This is, relevant. But I don't know if you have any comments on how people can actually do that to cut through the noise. And you've made videos on the marketing side of things and what the industry is currently like. But do you have any thoughts on stayability? Like, how do people, even on YouTube, let's say, how do you keep telling people, I'm a company, I exist, and I make products that are relevant to you? Like, any thoughts in that realm?
Well, firstly, I'm going to say I do not disagree with you. Not at all. Fully in agreement.
That feels good.
I think part of what I do when it comes to any video, be it one of the deep dive legal stuff or just here's a guitar, here's an amp or whatever, I think a really important part is entertainment factor. You have to keep people entertained. I think people have a really short attention span now more than ever, which is like Instagram Reels and TikToks and everything that you get it all in 30 seconds. How do I keep your attention for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
So there needs to be an element of entertainment. And I'm not sure that's there on those release days when, like, here's this new guitar and everybody's got it for that one day. Well, there it is. And then you never see it again, ever. Or here's a new pedal. And then it's just here through a clean tone. Here's with the distortion tone. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I feel like there needs to be a bit more entertainment factor. You need to do something interesting with it. Something fun. And if you're trying to advertise a product, like, it doesn't have to be like if you look at car ads, for example, that are on TV, sure, they're driving in locations but it's more so doing something unusual or doing something that grabs your attention. If the car ad was just here's a Ford that's stuck in traffic, which is where your car is actually going to be, no one would buy it. So you need to have some entertainment factor, something to grab some attention. And I think that's a big thing that's missing with a lot of product releases these days. And it's something memorable will change people's opinion on something, and it will give it staying power. Not here's a demo, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I wrote on one of your recent videos about the guitar world marketing. I wrote you a little essay in the comment section, and I'm curious to interact with you a little bit about it, because I had let you know that I had written it, but I didn't exactly. Although some of the stuff you just said, it kind of mirrors some of the things that I had written. I want to talk about that with you in the guitar marketing stuff. But before I do, I want to break for a moment to talk about two amazing sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. The first of which are friends over at Sweetwater, and they have launched a new program called the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. And this, to me, is something that sort of combines the elements of Reverb, the elements of Craigslist, and is just this great peer-to-peer option to be able to sell your used gear. And one of the coolest things about the Gear Exchange is when you sell your used gear and you decide that you want to take your proceeds and place them on a Sweetwater gift card, you don't incur any seller's fees as a consequence of selling on this platform. So if you're somebody like me that is routinely buying new things from Sweetwater, this is a great way to make sure that you maintain 100% of your earnings as a seller. Head over to sweetwater.com/used. You can set up an account for free and start selling right away. Secondly, I want to talk about Neural DSP. Now, many of us are familiar with the Quad Cortex. I know KDH has an interesting take on the Quad Cortex regarding Neural DSP, and it's okay to have opinions about Neural DSP, but one thing that is great about them, other than the Quad Cortex being a very cool and promising piece of gear that I think out of the box is pretty good, but I think hopefully if they can continue to evolve as we hope that they will, there's even going to be more cool stuff. They have amazing plugins which you can buy straight from their website, and they're offering our listeners an incredible deal, 30% off all plugins on the Neural DSP website. Any plugin you see, you get 30% off, and you're going to use the code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, get 30% off any one of the plugins except the brand new releases. Those will become available as part of this discount after 90 days. So if there's one that you've been eyeing that's brand new, like the Tom Morello one, just wait for 90 days, and then that will be available for that same 30% discount. And of course, the whole other catalog will be available. And we're hoping that sometime soon those will also be available to transport into your quad cortex, so you can use those same exact models and put them into your quad cortex and have those available to you as some of your AMP models inside of that. So go to neuraldsp.com. Again, use the code Chairman, get 30% off. All right. So back to the guitar marketing world. So one of the things that there's a couple of things that you said that I thought were poignant, and we've already sort of touched on them a little bit. One of them is sort of this barrage of I think you called it owning YouTube for a day, where seemingly every manufacturer, I think of a certain size, because it is expensive to do this. I think most gear demo or review people charge anywhere from $300 to $1,200 for a demo, plus the product in most cases. And then they flood the world of Instagram, YouTube, social media with product demo reviews that are all coming out on the same day. And this kind of floods the market, and then seemingly there's not much sustained content that continues after that. And I was suggesting that the life cycle of products has kind of changed in, I'd say, the last 5 years, where there really isn't much of an emphasis on staying power, as Grant had kind of said. And it's really about just continuing to release products, and that's the way to maintain relevancy, or at least in the mind of a lot of these brands. It's the more frequently that we can come out with new stuff, the more we're going to stay in the forefront of people's minds. And by having this strategy of just release after release after release after release, with not necessarily any plan to continue the product, is kind of a strategy that people use, and they're hoping that maybe every so many releases, there's something that actually ends up having staying power. And I kind of juxtapose this to a company like Exotic Effects, which I really admire, that sort of does the opposite of this, where they maybe only release one pedal a year, sometimes even less frequently than one pedal a year. And they really focus on depth. They try to develop artists that are going to be supporters of this product. They do sort of a gradual release of videos and demonstrations, and there isn't this desire to just try to flood the market for a day or for a week, and then these things sort of disappear into obscurity. And I think I used the metaphor, that a lot of these companies are sort of just swinging at the piñata blindfolded, and they're hoping that they get a hit with one of these pedals. And if they don't, they haven't invested too much. Most dealers, and this is just for context for people that aren't in the industry, most dealers for boutique pedal companies, that have, I'd say medium size companies, you can probably sell between 500 and 1,000 pedals on a product release. If you're selling, let's say you have 100 dealers in the US and 100 dealers internationally, and all of them buy 5, and presumably your big dealers are going to buy a whole lot more than that. You can sell 1,000 pedals pretty easily, and that can be a pretty good way to move the needle for your company and your brand, have a pretty decent profit margin, and then you can assess from the viability of those first 1,000 units whether it's going to be worthwhile to manufacture it again, or whether you're just like, hey, we're going to take whatever existing inventory we have, we're going to blow it out through one of our retailers that has the ability to buy our remaining few hundred units of stock. And, we profited on the first 500, and we're going to break even on the second 500. We're calling it a wash, and we're going to go to the next product release. And that seems to be the strategy that many companies, especially companies that have lower priced items, and by that I don't mean like $50, but I mean like pedals and things like that, where there's not a ton of overhead. There seems to be a sort of a lack of investment and almost a disinvestment of really trying to get a product to be something that you see on somebody's pedal board for the next 20 years. It's like, we're just going to flood the market. We're crossing our fingers. We're hoping for the best. And if it doesn't work out, we have an easy exit strategy where we can pull the ripcord and we just go on to the next product. Did you have any thoughts on that analysis of the sort of the manufacturer strategy, KDH?
Yeah, well, I see the incentive and the want to get it all out there and see an immediate profit. You just push for a short amount of time and get it, recoup your cost and then get your profit. I see the appeal to that. But I just feel like it's a long-term, it's not going to help you. You're just going to have a huge back catalogue of discontinued or products that just no one really wants. And then that long-term, if you're looking at a company that's got all these products that just no one cares about, and they've got that one that they hoped for, it's not as good as having, 5 well-established, put some time in, we saw a hole in the market and this does this better than the other stuff. I think that's just my personal preference that I'd much rather see. And if that's the concept that those companies are leaning on, then they can do more. They can do better marketing. Like, to me, I think the best marketing for any pedal is seeing it on pedal boards. Like, my Instagram feed is full of pedal boards that are posted. Like Brian, who isn't here. I love his stuff. He's just pedal boards all the time, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's great marketing, and that's done by your customers. Your customers bought a pedal, and it's going on their board. Boards are only a certain size, and when they choose to put your product there, that's not only a compliment to the product, but it's also a great advertisement for it. And the hype pedals, the hype stuff, I think it was actually probably worse maybe a few years ago, like 2017. There were people who were like new pedals almost like every week, new pedals on their board almost every week. And I'm thinking, well, what did you think about the pedal that you had last week? Oh, but it's gone now, it's replaced. I think staying power both in the market and on people's boards is huge, or at least it is for me.
Yeah.
Just a fun question for you. Has there been, if you could make a prediction, a pedal that's been released in the last year that you think we'll still be chatting about in 10? The next timeline, let's call it. Do you have any recent releases that I think this could be a home run for the company? I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
Yeah, I don't know if it's not the last year. Like, I could say the last few years. I could say maybe like, I think the Rev G3 was really good, like as a pedal, and I think that will remain on a lot of like heavier players' boards. But it's hard to, because like my mind is going back, and I can go back maybe a week, but there's already been 4 pedals released in the last week.
100%.
So it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. I think it's I think I used the metaphor that right now I think the industry, in particular with pedals, I think is definitely, people are favoring more of the hare instead of the tortoise, and I think that I agree with you, KDH, that I think it is sort of a vicious cycle to get into, because it's a really hard one to come out of if it's sort of like feast or famine for you. And the way that you generate revenue is by kind of doing these really steep ramp ups, and then seeing how it does, evaluating how it does, and then get kind of stopping production, blowing out the inventory, and then just moving to the next product. And it definitely, I think, ends up cheapening the brand long term, because again, as you said, that you're going to see a lot of this stuff for sale on used markets, Reverb, etc. And you're probably going to see these, if they're getting blown out for low prices, that then takes the resale value and also puts it down at this sort of rock bottom price as well. So it even sometimes will bottom out even the used prices, because the blowout price can be less than what the standard or average used price might be at that current time. Sometimes these blowouts are so low. And so it ends up, I think, making the customer question, well, like, why would I ever even buy this pedal new? If I wait for 6 months, I can get it for, $99 or less. and it'll be brand new. And I don't have to go to the used market even to get it. So I think that it ends up having some real serious problems. And so as a manufacturer of pedals, I really respect, a company like Exotic, where they just haven't taken the bait on any of that stuff. And so much of their products have had staying power. Like EP boosters, still heavily used today. SP compressor, still heavily used today on a lot of pedal boards. RC booster, still on a ton of pedal boards. There are effects of theirs that are sort of in the canonized group of guitar pedals. And I'm not saying that they're for everybody, that, there's not like a ton of metal players that we're going to see probably using an RC booster. But I would say for a big cross-section of guitar players, that is a staple unit that most people will have in specific genres of music. And it's a great effect. It's well made. And, they've spent the time to market to the person that product was developed for. And they've identified artists that fit that mold, and they've used those artists to help bolster the product. And they've done some really great work. And they were also really early on. I don't know if you've seen any of the Exotic reality web videos from like early YouTube days. And it's like somebody with like a handheld camcorder over the shoulder, like at a venue like the Baked Potato in LA. And it looks terrible. It looks like a home video, but they were like some of the first people on YouTube for guitar pedals that were even doing demo videos with artists. And they've really I think that they're one of the companies that I really look to, and I'm like, man, I wish I could, or I try to replicate something like that with our products, like depth over breadth for sure.
Yeah, and like going into what I was saying about entertainment. Your channel has entertainment. It's not, here's my volume at 12 o'clock and my tone it's this pedal is on a board, here it is in a rig, and putting it, like, that's the entertainment. Yeah. Bringing it to an artist or whatever. There's the entertainment factor, which I think is so important. Like when I look at YouTube as a business, I think it's incredibly competitive. I view my videos that I'm competing with Mr. Beast, because even though it's a completely different genre, but his thumbnail will be when you click on my video, his thumbnail and video will be in the recommended right beside it. I'm competing for your attention from not clicking on him. So that's how I think it should be structured. I could make 8-minute videos, or I could make 28-minute videos. I think the 8-minute videos are far more ingestible. I think adding a little of entertainment into gear is so important, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people are doing, because that takes time as well. And if you're a product demoer, that's your job, and you've got 3 pedals on your desk this week, and you know that there's more coming in next week, you don't have time to do that. So there's a lot I would change with the current industry, I think.
Yeah.
I actually, I want to ask you about that, if that's okay. What you would change. Let's say there's a company listening, an owner of a small company, and they're like, man, how do I make my YouTube videos more digestible? How do I reach a broader audience? You've mentioned in some of your videos spreading out the release date, across multiple weeks or maybe even months instead of all on one day. Before I get to that question, I wanted to give you that lead up so you could think about it, because again, I'm putting you on the spot. But I want to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, and then Mason's going to follow up with our last sponsor. The one I wanted to chat about is BTPA, Bestronix, or btpa.com. This is the place I go. I know Mason and Brian also go here. KDH, you may also every once in a while chat to someone at BTPH. I'm not BTPA. I'm not sure. But for all the pedal board needs, accessories, panel mounts, snakes, rack accessories, all of the parts I find really hard to find elsewhere, I go to Brad at BTPA. I was chatting to him this week for a part I couldn't find, and he had it for me right away. So check out BTPA or Bestronix, and use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off your order, and you'll be glad you did. Tell them the chairman sent you. Mason?
Well, as I've talked about many times, I am a known string destroyer. I have some sort of chemical imbalance that no doctor can articulate why. And the consequence is that I go through strings incredibly fast and have been relegated as of late to coated strings only in order to have longevity for my guitar strings. Until that I got in touch with Stringjoy. They sent me over some of their non-coated strings, and it turns out that whatever they've done with them, I'm able to use them in the same duration of my coated strings, the performance of an uncoated string, which is considerably better. They sound great, they last long, and I am absolutely in love with Stringjoy, and they are happening to give our listeners 10% off any of their strings or any of their subscription services, so you can have strings delivered to your door in a prescribed amount of time. Use the coupon code BOARDS, BOARDS, and get 10% off your order. Head over to stringjoy.com, use BOARDS upon checkout, and get 10% off. That's 90% away from free. Check out Stringjoy. All right.
Awesome. So back to my question here about how we can make let's stay with YouTube for now because we're all very familiar. How we can make it a better place both for the end user, the person buying, let's say, a pedal or a guitar, but also for the manufacturer. Because I have to say, I find it so uninspiring, both as a consumer and a manufacturer, when I know that a pedal is not going to be sticking around 2 years later. If I know it's a flash in the pan, there's nothing less inspiring to me than that. So I guess your opinion, KDH, how do we make YouTube a more cohesive environment for everyone involved? You've mentioned spreading out the videos, but any other insight, thoughts, things like that?
Yeah, well, I don't want to knock demo videos. I think they serve an important piece, an important part of the industry. If you were thinking about buying a pedal, you'll click on a pedal demo and you'll see it. But if you're in the advertising phase of a product, you're bringing out a new product, you want to let people know about them, do something stupid. That's my best advice to you. Do something stupid. Like, I'll give you an example. TC Electronic, like, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago at this point, came out with the G system. Big multi-effects board. They ran a tank over it.
Actually, really good pedal or good multi-effects.
Well, part of their advertising was they took it to some old ex-military place, and they ran a tank over it, and it still worked after. There is no reason to do that.
That's awesome.
Like, I think the video is still on YouTube, and it's like I can immediately. The G system isn't made anymore. TC Electronic has changed hands since, but I still recall that product because they did something stupid. That's got staying power in my mind. Maybe not on my board, but in my mind, it's got staying power because they did something stupid.
And so, didn't they like plug it back in also like afterwards and it like still worked or something like that?
It still worked, and they're like it's tank proof or something.
Built like a tank.
Yeah. So do something stupid. If you've got a string company, do a video where how many high E's does it take to take my body weight or something? Hold on to like high E's and just do that experiment. Like, do something stupid. There's no reason to do it. That doesn't prove anything about how good your product is, but it's something I'd watch because, well, how many high E's does it take to hold someone's body weight? I'd want to know. It's one of those entertainment factors, and then I'm thinking, oh, well, D'Addario can carry the weight of a person with 75 high E's. I now have that information in my head. It's and that's what I'm talking about. Like, you're competing with Mr. Beast style stuff too. He's doing stupid stuff and people are watching. Hundreds of millions of people are watching. Do the same thing with your product and then people will watch. It will not demo the product. It mostly has nothing to do with the product, but people will know about the product, like the example of the TC Electronic.
Yeah, I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the tank one.
Yeah, I kind of remember that. I also have this memory. I don't know if it was TC, but something like dropped a pedal like off a building or something like that. It might have been a case for a case. Like they put like a guitar in a case, they dropped it off the top of a building, and then they like plugged it in, and it still in tune.
However many years ago, didn't Elon Musk with the Cybertruck, he like